All right, you see what it is. We have more information for you. And this information is something that is rich, something that the community needs to hear. This is a discussion about the justice that we need. There are two pivotal points that the Detroit Justice Center and many others in coalition are fighting for. And you need to be heard because right now, the Detroit city budget is being voted upon. So we have till Monday. Monday, it's urgent right now. Monday till April 10th to make sure you're heard, seen, and bring about the change that is needed. Right now, I have Nancy Parker here with me, and Nancy is representative of Detroit Justice Center. How are you today?
I'm doing well, my brother. Thank you for having me.
Definitely, definitely. So let's get this whole thing on the road. We're going to open up and we're going to talk a little bit about right to counsel. Right to Counsel is an initiative that a lot of people remember. It's like, okay, that's a fight we won. Not necessarily. It's like on paper, yes, but actually having what was needed to supply and make sure that this fight is a victory for the people is something that is needed now. So I like for you to explain, break down to the people what's needed in this fight with Right to Counsel.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. So let's jump into this. So, as Khary just said, last year, many of y'all will remember May 10th, 2022, the Detroit Right to Counsel Ordinance became law. Organizers fought hard for that and we got it passed. But that was just half the battle. That was passing the law that says we're going to do this thing, but it was not funded, meaning that there wasn't money in it. So the demand where we're here today is that we need this ordinance to be funded. We need this law to actually help people, right? So what is the law? All Detroit residents whose income is not more than 200% of the federal poverty level must be represented by an attorney when facing eviction in the 36th District Court. So usually folks are familiar with criminal cases. In a criminal case, you know you have a right to an attorney. In civil cases, that is not the case. And what has been happening is that landlords have been evicting Detroiters unlawfully, illegally. Judges have not been giving them a chance to be heard in court, and folks are getting thrown out on the street. Folks, during COVID, we were able to get small moratoriums, but this is an ongoing issue. That's why it is very important that folks get the representation that they need. All
All
right.
right. I do have this question in reference to that.
Mhm.
So just expanding on this because many people may never have seen this process, gone through this process, or witnessed it. An eviction.
Mhm.
We kind of conceptually understand, but what's the process? You know, from the outside in, people think like, "Wow, I thought you have like 4 months to make a declaration, and then it goes back and forth." Wouldn't you have your ducks in a row? I mean, how could an eviction happen to a person that's staying on top of their business?
So there are many reasons why someone might get evicted, right? So I think traditionally people are thinking, "Oh, you didn't pay your rent, that's your fault,
Hmm.
USOL."
Hmm.
But we know life happens, right? And we need folks to treat our brothers and sisters with care and compassion that they would receive. So falling behind on rent payments, that's just one reason someone might be facing eviction. And we see is a continued increase in rent, right? So it's not as if these are all rent controlled homes. If a new landlord comes in or new changes, people's rents are getting increased, and it's not correlating with increases in their income.
So I have this question: how common is it for a lot of the traders to see an increase in rent? We hear the term inflation thrown out a lot. Some of us are more familiar with the idea, but
Mhm.
how common is it for rent to go up in the city of Detroit?
Kari, I would say it's pretty standard. I mean, it's not uncommon. It happens at DJC. We have clients who get notices that their rent will go up. We have employees that work for us that have to move because they can't afford these rent increase. As we see gentrification take hold of the city, rent consistently is going up.
And historically, before this ordinance passed, the right to counsel, and for people to know, like an ordinance is basically what would be like a law in the books of a city.
Mhm.
What were the rules about this? So what would happen is you're saying that as a landlord, I had the opportunity to have an attorney represent me, which an attorney representing you, for people to know, is good for many reasons. Even if you necessarily don't have the best attorney, at
Mhm.
least someone standing in place where certain questions can be pressed upon, and things to happen. Different questions. An attorney can be separate counsel than you,
Mhm.
but landlords had always the right to an attorney in Detroit, and you're telling me that tenants never had this right to an attorney?
Correct. Like it sounds mind blowing when we're talking about an eviction. We're talking about something as so sacrosanct as someone's livelihood, where you live, where you rest your head, right? Where you house your family. And yes, people can be thrown out on the street without representation, meaning lay people don't know the process, right? You
Mhm.
talked about that a little bit earlier. There's a process that the court lays out that landlords have to follow.
Hmm.
They have to file things in court. They
Mhm.
have to wait the requisite 30 days, right? They have to give you that notice to quit. That is not happening, right? And so if you don't have representation and your landlord doesn't like you, they want to get you out or whatever the case may be, and they just try to either illegally evict you or they say you have to be gone in 10 days, if you don't know the law, how can you fight against that, right? And so, what this law is requiring is that when someone is faced with an eviction and they show up to court, the court via the city is required to provide that person with a lawyer free of charge, right? And so, that lawyer is a landlord tenant lawyer. That means they understand the law, they understand the process, they can find the pitfalls, which happens many of times with these landlords that don't follow the right procedure. And if they don't, even if they claim that they have a good basis to evict someone, they still have to follow that process. And if they don't follow that process, they have to start all over again.
Mm. And in this process, the landlord always had right to counsel, and this whole concept, as you all should know, like signing up and you know deciding to lease a space or rent a
Mhm.
space, that's a legal, because I'm signing a legal document, I'm signing contracts,
That's
this is
right.
all going to be on paper. So an attorney is involved, or at least should be involved, in drafting. This is a legal matter, and in this legal matter, the people never had right to counsel, which now has a ordinance that's a grand win, but that right to counsel concept doesn't have any funding behind it. And that's essentially what's happening.
That's exactly what's happening, right? So the law was passed again. Organizers fought for that, right? Like,
Mhm,
hey, there is an imbalance of power here.
mhm,
Like, this isn't right. Like you're saying, like all the landlords, they have counsel, right? Because
mhm,
in order to go about their business, they have counsel. They understand what's going on, what the process is, what the law is. Lay people are just trying to find a place to live.
mhm,
They don't enter into these contracts with an attorney to review it, right?
mhm,
So when it comes time for them to be displaced, it only makes sense that they in turn also have someone on their side that can say, hey, 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 this isn't going the right way. And so the law says it's a mandate, right? That means it's a requirement. The city of Detroit must provide folks who are facing eviction with an attorney. However, where's that attorney going to come from?
and that's what we're talking about here. So you have information that we see, like as I'm reading this, you just said all Detroit residents whose income is more than 200% of the federal poverty level must be represented by an attorney. All types of eviction cases are covered. Because there
Mhm.
are other types, as you just shared. Hmm.
Right. So everyone traditionally you thinking non-payment of rent. But there's also you could get kicked out if landlord claims that there was property damage or there was a lease violation. Think terms in a lease, terms in a contract that says, Kari, you can only have two people living in here, or
Mhm,
you can't have pets or whatever, like terms, right?
mhm,
If the landlord alleges that there's been a violation of those terms and you've paid your rent on time every month, that's not an issue. You can still be evicted for a violation of that lease, right? So we
mhm,
still want those folks who have been paying their rent, those who have not, whatever the case may be, they still need an attorney. So this will cover all of those eviction cases. And it also includes representation for folks who are illegally locked out. Now, an illegal lockout is when a landlord doesn't file a case in the court, right? They just try to intimidate a tenant to leave. So that could look like actions like they change the locks on you, they shut off your utilities, you don't have any light, you don't have any water, they threaten violence, may get their goons on you, or, we're going to break your legs if you don't move. And again, if I don't have an attorney, how do I know what recourse I have to push back against this?
Okay. So in this, you have more information to share as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's very important for the people to know what is in the ordinance. So we celebrated, we passed it, but then we're back asking for money. But what is in the ordinance? So tenants and homeowners who are facing foreclosures are covered, meaning everyone is entitled to representation. A lawyer, free of charge. You do not have to pay for this lawyer. The ordinance mandates, again, it requires that community outreach happens so that Detroiters know their housing rights. Let me tell you, Khary, it has been breaking my heart to come down to city council and give public comment, hear people give public comment. And so many people are living in their home, in their cars, on the street because they got kicked out and they didn't realize all the services that were available to them to get help so that they weren't living on the street. And so part of having a law is the masses of people need to be educated about what the law is, how it applies to them, and how they can access these services. So we need community outreach.
That's deep. That I definitely think that, and that's why we're glad to pounding that pavement even here. But this needs to be amplified when we think about some of those challenges, especially when it comes to like being locked out, or someone saying like, "Hey, I saw an extra person in there last night." You know what I'm saying? It may have just been your cousin coming over for 2 days, and now the next thing you know, you're getting evicted because someone is claiming that another tenant is staying in your residency.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so the budget must be prepared to fund also this Office of Eviction Defense that's based on the most recent 36th District Court data. 36th District, that's the local court in Detroit that handles all these matters. So when cases are filed, they all go to 36th Court. We need an annual public meeting to report on the evictions and to share the public data, right? Because people need to know how many folks are getting thrown out on the street.
Yeah.
Okay. But let's keep moving on because we got a lot of great information I want to make sure we get to. Giving people context of what we're talking about. These are not small, singular, isolated events. We're talking about in 2022, over 23,000 people, exactly 23,342 Detroit residents faced eviction. Now, this does not include the illegal evictions or the retaliatory actions by landlord that's outside of that court process. So again, if they change the locks on you and you were SOL, you're not part of my 23,000 number. If we move on, we see over 55,000. We have 55,781 or more Detroiters were impacted, and we're recognizing that an eviction impacts the household. So not just one person is living in these apartments or whatever the case may be. You have a whole family, right? And so now this whole family has gotten thrown out. About 29% of Detroit's homeless population are families with school-age children. So think about that. We're talking about an issue where you have kids that are supposed to be in school, supposed to be studying, supposed to get a good dinner, good night's sleep, and they're houseless. That is a problem. 80 to 90% of Detroit residents facing evictions are eligible for full legal representation under this Detroit Right to Counsel Ordinance. Now, in 2023, we see these numbers are just increasing. We have 28,564 Detroit residents. And so again, we know more people are impacted. So the total impact, we count at 68,553 residents are projected to face eviction at the current rate of the case filings that we see at the 36th District Court. 10% of Detroit's population will face eviction. Now, I want to highlight something about that 10% of Detroiters. That is equal to 23 to 25% of Detroiters of the Detroit rental population. So that is high. We're talking about a quarter of the folks who are renters in the city of Detroit will face eviction this year.
Mm.
Okay, so we got to keep going through these stats. It's really staggering. All right. And even that number is conservative because we can't capture all the things that don't come through the correct process, but we know that it actually happens. So what do we need? We need full funding of the right to counsel. And right now, the demand is $27 million.
Um, so naturally, the next question is, how do you arrive to that number? How will 27 million be enough? Will this number change? Is this relative to the rental population? Is this
Mhm.
relative to the poverty rates in Detroit? Like, what determines this number?
So the 27 million is an estimate, but it's based on looking at how many case filings there are in the 36th district court and, just projecting um, the time and labor that it'll take for each case, how many attorneys will be needed, right? And again, we're getting attorneys from different legal aid organizations. They need to be paid and staffed in order to handle the voluminous number of cases. So you look at the filings at 36th district, you do an estimation of how many attorneys are needed to be able to process and handle these cases, the amount of time that it'll take for these cases, and that 27 million number has been calculated. I personally did not do those calculations, but we got great leaders, part of the Detroit Right to Counsel Coalition. My dear sister Tanya Myers Phillips is leading the charge, and they have all the data. They have all the data to back this up. Um, and let me say, I know you've told the people that the city's total budget is $2.6 billion. And I think that's very important that we keep reminding people, although these may seem like very large number when I say the demand is 27 million, but 27 million from 2.6 billion with a B is only 1% of the city's budget.
And I also want to bring out the point that when we think about some of these numbers and what it goes to, and that's why I asked, because it could be more as we see the population in Detroit trend to change. This is going into, I read one article saying it's more renters than homeowners, which I don't necessarily believe that per se, but there are a lot more renters throughout the city of Detroit now. And home ownership is even changed. And then in some ways, with the ways that people are kind of hawking houses, it's like even the homeowner is like an asterisk. But this is just Khary talking Khary, because if you got a mortgage, it's kind of like, you're relative ownership. You know what
Right.
I'm saying? But
Right.
with this still being said, there are going to be more standard lease and renters throughout the city of Detroit. I do have this. You're speaking of residents. Was this rule and ordinance even for like a lot of the business owners? Because it's a lot of businesses I see leaving spaces, possibly being evicted, or possibly, I don't know what's happening even in the business class. Is this, did businesses have this same blanketed rule before this ordinance came into place, or were businesses under that same rule and order as well?
So with businesses, it's going to be a little bit different. You're talking about a sophisticated party. If you're a business, you're dealing with contracts. You have a lawyer. That's going to be a different relationship there.
So basically, businesses always were usually going to have their counsel, possibly even like right to counsel, but the people in business of real estate and art and landlording and leasing and things like that were taking advantage of and exploiting the fact that these people didn't. And now it's about making sure that the resources exist so the lawyers can actually follow through, because as much as it's not just the lawyer trying to line their pockets, some of this, you need photography, you need evidence, you need data, you need to pull some information. Some of this stuff you may are resources, not just to pay the attorney the fair wage that the attorney needs. It's the resources to actually move forward with a solid case and represent the people that are dealing with these evictions.
Absolutely, absolutely, Khary. So a case can be very complicated, or it could be relatively simple. It all just varies, right? If the case requires, like you said, to do some some investigation. Maybe you got to talk to witnesses. Maybe you got to drive out to places. If it ends up going where you have to take depositions, all this stuff costs money, right?
Mhm.
So I'm not just talking about paying someone's salary. There are court costs when there is a litigation, when there's a case for landlord tenant court that's going on. And so again, we're here, we're talking about the landlord tenant relationship. So those would be, folks in apartments and houses that they're renting to live as their domicile. Mhm.
And in this, and I know we're getting information fast for these people because it's only just a little bit we got on this one, because we got something else just as big coming, like almost in like 2-3 minutes, and it'll be a lot more information. I can already tell you the call to action. And shout out to Tanya. Tanya is has been an ally in a fight that my community is facing, but not just shout out to her for that. Shout out to her for all of the work that she's been doing for years connecting to the people. But this real key call to action is Monday. Make sure that your voice is heard. Make comment at city council. Be heard, be seen, make change. Because the challenge, why I believe a lot of the community voices not being represented effectively, is because I know we have so much apathy. We've dealt with so much defeat. We've dealt with just being run over in so many ways, but we still must stay in that fight, because the more that we become apathetic and are less engaged, then the more and more it's only going to become more strenuous, and it'll just be right in our face. We've seen these fights and we've seen victories in these fights, and we have to just stay persistent on it. But with that, I want you to give like a couple more other key points with this little bit of time we have left.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I definitely want to get into that call to action, but let me touch on the funding again. So the demand is 27 million. Again, that's only 1%, and that's what we were talking about, the projections, right? So these aren't to the T accurate numbers. We're just trying to guesstimate fairly accurately what we think. But if we were to just only look at 2022, we would still need $21 million, right? And right now, Right to Counsel is not fully funded. So the demand for this year, we need an additional $12 million for the remainder of this fiscal year, 2022, 2023. And that's per council resolution. City council can do that. All right. And so for next year, we're talking 23, 24, we need that $27 million. And again, Detroit has the money, y'all. Don't let them fool you. They have the money. Okay. So again, the budget is 2.6 billion, but there's also surplus money. There's 156 million budget of the surplus. Now we also got all that ARPA money. That was that COVID relief money, people, right? So we got the American Rescue Plan money. There's 826 million opera dollars that Detroit received that was specifically to help and line the pockets of Detroit residents who were struggling. Nothing more than housing needs can pinpoint in terms of that's where those dollars should go. So again, we want this to be fully funded, and the money is there to do so.
All right. So with that, I think I'm just showing the other information about getting there. You all see it. Make sure you guys are heard. Make sure you all are aware. Make sure you checking out everything. And we got some more information coming right for you, because just in this fight, it's other fights. We got another big fight coming up. And this big fight is definitely held down an anchor from many people. Here in the Detroit is Different Family, Honeycomb, Tawana Petty's been heavy in it. When we think about what's happening with the shot spotter program. And right now it's getting kind of confusing, because it's like shot spotter, shot stopper, shot spotter, shot stopper. So the shot spotter program is a technology that I became aware of through Tawana. And Tawana had a great Riverwise magazine a couple years back. And you're learning a lot about AI technology, and in this AI technology and how it impacts us, digital justice for real. So shot spotter, and I'm going to have you explain a whole lot more as we get pulling all the information up, is a program where basically is following sound. This has been something enacted and even in communities like mine, where people are light off fireworks, and then the next thing you know, it's like 15 squad cars just arrive on spot. And it's like, what's going on here? Like, what's going on? People just have fireworks and everything. So what's happening with this, and then also the lawsuit about this too, just like using this technology. It's kind of like that movie a couple years back with Tom Cruise, that Minority Report, where basically technology is trying to assume, in my mind, the criminality and the predisposition of people to be criminals before they are criminals. And this is a Khary Frazier stance, not even a Detroit is different stance. People hide behind the veil of technology as if technology could not be biased, but we know that man is designing this technology. And usually man that's designing this technology ain't man that look a whole lot like me. And when man that don't look a whole lot like me comes into America with the American traditions and they think about anything of criminality, it's usually man that looks like me. So with that long diatribe and introduction, let's get into a little bit of this discussion of what this Shot Spotter program is all about.
All right, so let's do it. Like you said, we have a lot of information to go through, so I apologize if it's a little dense, but it's very important. So I'm gonna break it down for folks. All right. So what is Shot Spotter? Shot Spotter is audio surveillance technology that uses hidden microphones to detect loud noises. It's marketed as an acoustic gunshot detection system. ShotSpotter is a corporation that profits off of crime in urban neighborhoods. They're headquartered somewhere in California, right? But they make money off of crime. So this is a corporation that has no incentive to actually see crime reduced or stopped. So I want people to think about that when they're out here advocating for a technology that profits off of crime in our neighborhoods. Now, the algorithms that ShotSpotter uses to analyze and then classify sounds has not been peer reviewed or independently evaluated. And why
Okay.
that's important,
Okay.
that goes to what Kari's talking about.
All right. Now explain what you mean by peer review or evaluated, and why that is important for something to step into this realm. And this also is kind of, as we know, this whole arc of privatization. Shout out to Antonio for saying, like, yeah, I grew up in the generation of privatization,
Mm.
meaning that you have private entities, meaning businesses interacting with government and engaging in government needs, especially when we think about what justice could be and possibly incriminating a person. This is very scary because it's a business with profit motives
Mhm.
providing public good to people. But explain the peer review part for us that are more layman, you know.
Okay. And it's alleged public good because I don't see the public good. But the peer review part, why that's important. When anytime there's a technology or um, an algorithm, what happens is I have a product. I say it does XYZ, and this is the math, this is the calculations, this is my um, equation that I use. I need to hand it off to somebody else who is not affiliated with me, who can check my work and say, okay, yeah, this thing actually works the way Nancy says it works. And this is just how it happens in the industry. This is how, you can say it's been peer reviewed, it's been independently tested, meaning again, someone who maybe is a leader in this field but not affiliated with me looked it over and said, yeah, this is good to go. Now, that's don't be mistaken. That can still happen, and you get, what you're talking about in terms of still racist bias within technology. But with ShotSpotter, we're talking about a corporation that answers to shareholders, so they are beholden to make a profit, right? So much so that they have refused requests for their algorithms, for their calculations, for their basis of how they're doing this, right? To be looked at and said, okay, yeah, this passes muster.
And you're an attorney, so you can go into this. Would they stand by the whole concept of this is our intellectual property?
So it's not.
And you can't, and we don't want to let this out, because if we let it out, then somebody steals it and they make profit. And this is also the problem of private entities engaging in public good. And I agree with you. I don't know whether it is or isn't, but just anything. I mean, even the garbage trucks that aren't city of Detroit, even the, you know, Lord knows we have like a lot of mercenary fighters fighting on behalf of the American military right now. And it's like, if I'm not necessarily in support of waving the flag for a soldier, but it's a different perspective. You look at it if I'm doing this for a profit motive versus if I am under the guise, which usually holds the legal liability with an entity to follow through for public good more so than a corporation.
Right.
So.
Right. Absolutely. And so to let you know how greedy this company is, we talk about legal liability. They have had lawsuits against ShotSpotter, and a court ordered, a judge said, hey, turn over this information so that the other side can look at it. ShotSpotter opted to take a sanction rather than turn over that information, meaning they rather, layman's terms, like get in trouble with the court, have to do other things than actually turn over their work. So when they were required, and this is not an issue of someone, trying to copyright infringement, all this stuff is trademarked, and they have their seal, and there are actually other acoustic gunshot detection systems. So they're not the only one in the market. But it just goes to show their greed and what they're hiding, that you won't even allow others who are experts in the field to sign off on these algorithms. Because again, why that's important, is that it classifies a sound as a gunshot, and then once it has made that designation, it sends an alert to the police departments, who are then deployed into these communities with their guns blazing, ready for like a Wild Wild West situation, right? When in actuality, the the research and the data and all the studies shows that ShotSpotter is ineffective and expensive.
I
So,
mean, I would say even my neighborhood, fireworks consistently. Like we've seen it happen where it's like, man, the cops are swarming over here off of fireworks,
yeah,
you know.
yeah.
And some of the fireworks aren't even the fireworks where like some fireworks it's like, that may be a gunshot. No, like like rock, phew, like okay, that doesn't sound like a gun at all. But then the next thing you know, it's like, you got 7 squad cars coming out armed, ready for war.
They're ready, and we have children on the street, right? We have babies in our communities. We have our elderly people that we love and care for. We have ourselves. And so this technology has been proven to not be able to differentiate, to tell the difference between those firecrackers going off, between a car backfiring, between construction sounds that happen, between a helicopter going off. Like, the list is endless of loud noises that say, they call them loud urban noises that you traditionally can hear in a busy city. This technology cannot adequately differentiate. So what we have seen, and this is not conjecture, this is not, us being too fearful. We have seen this in Chicago. This is happening elsewhere. In the Chicago's Office of the Inspector General found that it rarely produced evidence of gun-related crime, investigatory stop, or recovery of a firearm. That's because almost 91% of the time, I'm going to say that number again, almost 91% of the time, the ShotSpotter alerts that the Chicago police departments were being deployed to respond to resulted in no evidence of any gun-related crime at all. So it was either a firework, a car backfiring, or something wholly completely different, right? But it still put those resources on the police department to show up, and then it causes them to interact very hostile with the people who are in those neighborhoods. So the presence of ShotSpotter increases stop and frisk by the police. In Chicago, they saw, because of ShotSpotter, there was more than 2,400 incidents of stop and frisk. These are regular Black and brown people who are walking in their neighborhood and all of a sudden are getting jacked up. And we don't want that. We know that this is something that has happened. It can happen. It continues to happen. There are numerous studies, right? In St. Louis, there was a study that found that it created no reduction in violent crime, but it did increase the demand on police resources. Last fall, all we heard from DPD was saying how, oh, the department is short so many people, they're stretched thin. And then at the same time, they're asking for ShotSpotter. If you're already stretched thin, ShotSpotter is not going to help you. It's going to cause you to be even more stretched thin. More folks, more police officers will be deployed where they could actually be doing something beneficial or effective, but they're not. They're out on the street looking for gun casings that don't exist, claiming that there's an intangible of they can't quantify what they prevent, therefore it is working. And we all know some smoke and screens and daggers when we see it. Like, no, we're smarter than that. This thing does not work. Okay. And not only does it not work, it's stupid expensive. The city of Detroit is spending $8.5 million on ShotSpotter. They initially wanted to spend 7 million ARPA dollars on ShotSpotter. Again, this is money that's supposed to be going in our pockets, supposed to help people get through the pandemic. They wanted to spend it on a surveillance technology that's not preventive, but reactive, right? So if the gun is already popped off, y'all coming in after the fact, that's not keeping me safe, right? And so a coalition formed kind of ad hoc, but Detroiters are always ready to battle. Like you said, we always got to stay fighting. So the call was put out there when we learned that this was happening. A coalition formed with Detroit Justice Center, Detroit Action, Michigan Liberation, Bog Center, like all the dope organizers in the city that consistently are at the forefront. We the People Michigan, Detroit Will Breathe, the list goes on. When folks heard what was going on, the coalition formed and we were, trying to educate people, let them know what was going on. We were able to get the city to back away from using our money because ARPA dollars are our money that was meant to support Detroiters. And so they just shifted it to the general fund where DPD consistently is able to just walk in a room, say, hey, we need more money, and they get it. They already get a third of the city's budget.
Yeah.
And so, at least that was a win. That was a victory for organizers that said, hey, you're not going to use our ARPA dollars on this, right? So that happened. It did pass, right? But we don't just lay down and take it. So through the coalition, it was decided that, a lawsuit needs to be filed based on how this went down, based on the process. So folks will recall a few years back, there was a push led by the ACLU to pass a community input over government surveillance ordinance. And that passed. Again, these are hard fought wins from organizers in the city. That passed. That requires the DPD and the city to do certain things. Specifically, it requires them to post a surveillance technology specification report that details how this technology is going to be used, all the civil rights and civil liberties implications of this technology, posted on the website at least 14 days before discussion happens so that the public can be informed, so that folks can engage in informed debate. That didn't happen.
And also, let me say this too. And you're an attorney, so you're very well aware of this. But as much as we see, as people may say, the law is ambulance chasing, car accidents, and things like that with lawsuits. The city of Detroit and Chicago and many of these other cities, I'm assuming with this technology, but I know the city of Detroit pays all so much money in police brutality cases every year because of stuff like this.
Absolutely.
Like the amount of money, if you sit through a police commissioners meeting and just marvel at the amount of money, where it's like, man, if you all were more effective police officers, we would have more of a budget for whatever public safety could be done. But this reactionary tactic, which in a lot of ways policing itself could be looked at as all reactionary, is not solving the crux of the issue. It's a lot of winch hunting out here. It's just not solving the issue. And then the idea of most people responding to this is the relative quote unquote feeling safe. And then per capita, when we think about this being as crime obviously is a symptom of the lack of resources that exist in a place. So it's like if you solve poverty, then you heighten the quality of life of people, then that addresses the crime. but you can't solve the issue by addressing the symptom itself. Sometimes this stuff is like 2 + 2 = 4, but we're making it a lot more
Yeah.
difficult, and
Yeah.
we're adding more seasoning to it
Yeah.
because other people want to pull out things from the kitchen before the meal is done. And we're sick
Absolutely.
of that in Detroit. We're sick of that in Detroit. So my bad.
No, don't apologize. Absolutely. You make a great point, right? If we can address the root issues, if we can have a conversation, if we can come to the table with ideas and resources, which organizers, have continued to do, if the city actually listened and invested resources, we wouldn't be in these same
Yes.
debates
Yes.
over Project Green Light and Shot Spotter, and now they have bowler wraps. They'll shoot something from a gun and strings will catch you at your feet. What are we doing here?
And even worse, I mean, I'm gonna tie this to what we spoke about in the beginning. If you kick me out my house, chances are it's a higher probability I may turn to what people label as quote unquote crime, which Khary Frazier, back to me, now that Detroit is a different thing. This whole country's been a criminal enterprise from the beginning. Stolen land, stolen labor, stolen loan, but continue.
That part. But no, absolutely. If I don't have food to eat, if I don't have a place to live, if I don't have, clothes to put on my kids' back, I'm going to resort to what I got to do.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we see what that is, right? It's people engaging in harm to others for pure survival. So what if we address survival needs? I'm going to pivot now because it's all related. And I know time is of the essence, right? So at the state of the city address, we heard the mayor put out a shot stopper initiative. Now I'm going to say it again, shot stopper. Very confusing, seemed very lazy to me, not creative at all. But this is different from the shot spotter that we were just talking about. This is shot stopper initiative. And so what is this? This is Mayor Duggan committing $10 million towards violence prevention for about 3 to 5 community-based organizations to create their own anti-violence program in a 3 to 4 square mile radius of a pre-identified area in the city.
Like who would have thunk? You could have kind of took that 10 million, put it right over towards people staying in their homes, and it possibly helps the people. But continue.
Imagine that, right? So what this breaks down to mean is that the local organizations will conditionally receive a $700,000 grant to conduct community violence intervention work in those high crime areas. So the organization will be responsible for reducing homicides and non-fatal shootings in their zone. The organizations will get a 2-year contract to conduct the work. If they meet the criteria of reducing the crime/violence, DPD or the city has created some sort of like equation that counts the homicides and the non-fatal shootings and looks at that number. And if that number continues to decrease, to go down in that area, then those groups, those orgs will be awarded an additional $700,000 as performance grant, like a performance bonus.
I do got to say this. It's so much more. And Nancy's coming back. We're going to expand on this because I got a lot of opinions on this weird vigilante justice type thing that'll come about from this. But please continue.
Yes. And thank you for raising it in that framing. So organizers, when we were railing against Shot Spotter, we said, give the money to the people in the communities who are doing this work. At the top of my mind, I think of the Detroit safety team. They hold trainings for folks. They do de-escalation training, conflict resolution. Like they go into the communities and they work with folks. They have a very small budget. So, it's small scale. I'm thinking about that. But the way the mayor has rolled this out, it was almost like a Hunger Games situation. Let's get community-based orgs to fight for this little bit of chump change we're going to give them. And you must reduce crime. You must reduce homicides and shootings by a certain percent to get more money. And if you don't reduce it, you don't get more money. It's almost like a game show gimmick, right? So to what you're saying, Khary, that can empower anybody on the street with any type of ad hoc group to say, hey, let's go apply for this money. We gonna go banging on doors and demanding people's guns and jacking people on the street and basically acting like deputized police officers, which is what we don't want. We want true community orgs, true people in the streets, in the neighborhoods who have been doing this work. It might be an old some elders, some mom and pop, that when something goes down, we all know we got to go to XYZ, right? To see if we can squash the beef. Those folks may not, have the resources right now to fill out the application the way the city wants it. Whereas some other people who are, in bed with DPD can say, okay, we're going to get our application together and we're going to basically do exactly the same thing that DPD does, just with the fake badge. And that's not what we want. So in order for this to be taken seriously, what the organizers were calling for, we need a true office of violence prevention. So at a basic level, this needs to be fully funded with a minimum of $50 million. If you see the acronym OVP, that stands for the Office of Violence Prevention. Right now, the mayor said 10 million. 10 million is chump change. DPD has over a third of the city's general fund, right? That amounts to over $330 million at DPD's disposal. And they continue to not be able to reach these benchmarks that they have now put on these community-based organizations, right? We don't see a consistent decrease in homicides and violent crime every year from DPD. That we see increases, right? We know they don't do that, and they have a third of the budget. So you want groups, small groups, to scale up with a minimum starting with 700,000 and do what DPD can't do with 330 million? How does
Also,
that make sense?
uh, also, now I gotta get this point. We're gonna explain when I get you back, and we really roll out all this stuff about shot stopper, which is a person. Shot spotter is technology. Shot stopper is a person. Shot spotter is the technology. But in reference to all of this stuff, first off, it's an incentive to have crime for police because it keeps them with the job. Like, let's point blank put it like that. And many people consistently, like, when you look at a lot of data, I mean, even going to our current president, I know y'all like Uncle Joe. If you go to the current data of all of the things in prisons that were built to think that crime will continue to exist, we're shocked to find that crime, quote unquote, is going down. And now you come up with new ways to quantify what becomes crime, what to keep boots on the street with officers, and officers are becoming more militarized. Myself, Yusef, Tristan, Quasi, Aquamo, and other brothers were talking about Cop City down in Atlanta. Stay up on this, because the thing when we talk about defunding in the police is these police don't need this much money. We need to defund where it's going and reallocate these funds, because it's reactionary. It's responding to the symptoms of the social ills of this sick society that has exploited people for forever. People are not wanting to be in these situations where they're turning to what we label as criminality. Are there some? Yes. But for the most part, no, not at all. And we're making people into be criminals because we have systems and institutions that create this. You can look at the new Jim Crow, but even when I read the book, it was like, oh man, and shout out to her. I mean, hell of a book, but this is stuff that we've been hearing in our neighborhoods for forever. You know, it just had to be put on paper in a different way for certain people to respect it. It has to come from certain professors to respect it. But if you live in neighborhoods like mine, I'm for real in a neighborhood where it's labeled as poverty, it's labeled as criminality, and it's function. It's a culture over here. We work with one another. And the best way to work with us, if you want to do public safety, if you want to do businesses, if you want to do community engagement, philanthropy, or whatever, is to actually engage and talk to us. Be here, residency, work with us, talk to us, engage, understand the culture before casting aspersions on what you think communities like ours should be looking like. So I had to stand on that soapbox right quick.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, brother. I appreciate that. I want to touch on two things real quick. So that 50 million that we're asking for the OVP, exactly what you just said. Take it from DPD's budget. So call it a divestment, a defund, whatever. I don't care what words you use, but take that money away from DPD and put it in the Office of Violence Prevention, which is an office for the people, right? So that's one right there. That's where we can get this money from. DPD, you consistently for years had this money. You're not doing what you need to do. Give it to the people, right? But secondly, and you definitely gonna have to get me on later so that we can expound a little bit more. But when we talk about crime, it's so fascinating to me because what is crime? It's something that the city labels or the state labels, and then that's what people talk about, that crime. But I want to talk about a different crime. It's criminal to shut off people's water. Water is a human right. That is crime. That is criminal. DTE, we can't get consistent electricity in a modern city in 2023 anytime the wind blows down my street on the west side, or if the rain is heavy a little bit, I lose power. That is criminal. That is criminal. So when we talk about criminality, when people want to talk about Black pathology, no, y'all have set people up to fail, and it's institutionalized, it's systemic, and you're doing it intentionally. And you don't want to talk about all the other crime that is actually being committed against the people.
Mhm.
So let's keep it moving a little bit because we definitely want to make sure people have that call to action, right? So we talked about root causes. Organizers have been demanding that the city fund communities with resources that we know will address the root causes of harm and violence, right? So we know poverty is the main cause of crime, right? The alleged crime of stealing to eat, right?
Well, wait. Like you said, the crimes that the police, quote unquote, strap up their boots and knock in doors for. But like you just said, the
Exactly.
crimes that they talk about, you know
Nope.
what I'm saying? There's a lot of crimes going up the road in Livonia, Birmingham, Troy, Novi, Washington, D.C. But continue.
Exactly. But they want to talk about this, right? But what would it take? What would it take to address these issues? It's not going to take a reactive surveillance tool. It's going to take investing in our communities. And that means mental health services and supports. It means creating an unarmed response team. How many brothers and sisters have we lost who are suffering from, a mental illness or in the midst of a crisis? Their loved ones call DPD for help and they get executed, they get gunned down. Why can't we think more creatively? What if we had an unarmed response team? When your loved one is going through something, you can call a completely different number and train specialists, social workers, mediation specialists, de-escalation experts, right? Just community members can come out and rally. And those people are paid, right? To come and do this work that we know is necessary. Can we get a universal basic income? All right. And I'm trying to hip everyone to game. When I say universal basic income, this is UBI. This is money that your city, your government, your people should be giving the residents, no strings attached.
All right. Now, to that point, we had Kofi Kenyatta on talking about the guaranteed basic income, which is more specific for people more in need.
Correct.
For the city of Detroit.
Correct.
Not only it does, is Kofi saying like the money is there from the city. Kofi and Up Together, the organization we talked to, go through your Detroiters difference. He has matching organizations, possibly 3 times over. They just want to see the proof of concept, and Detroit has to put some money in the pool to just show good faith that you're really in it. But if Detroit puts a little bit in, we got the money for guaranteed basic income, and it'll go across the board for many Detroiters. Continue.
Absolutely. And guaranteed basic income is where we can start, right?
Mhm.
Because I have a job, I have steady income. So I'm cool. Like I don't need it, right? Clearly it would be nice, but can we start with our brothers and sisters who are struggling to find a job, who because of either substance abuse issues or whatever the case may be, mental health issues, aren't able to have that steady income. So then they resort to other things. So if we start with the guaranteed basic income, that will lift a whole bunch of residents up, right? And so that would come with some stipulations or qualifications, right? You would need to be under a certain threshold to receive that income. But again, we know that poverty is one of the root causes of these crimes, right? Crimes of survival. So if we can meet people where at the point where they need, which may be, I need some money in my pocket, yo. We got mad ARPA funds that have not been, dispersed Folks don't want to see that continue to go to technology. Give me money in my pocket. And the research shows when you give people these no strings attached money, they use it for utilities, they use it for rent, and they use it for food.
Yeah, it's a lot of child tax income that stretched across those years during COVID that shows a lot of data against what people label as conservative research of basically, oh, these people were lazy. No, not at all. Many people will turn back, and actually, even the laziness, if you want to play this game, our propensity to spend, another economic term, is high. So this will come back into the community, recirculate, and actually people will respond in ways that are peaceful. We remember what it was like when stimuluses were in the streets. You remember those responses. You know how people were engaging. You know the peacefulness that were in communities that have quote unquote always been labeled. And then we saw a lot of owners of businesses saying people don't want to work. Yeah, because people kind of didn't want the goofy job you were giving them anyway, that you were exploiting them and having them do things that they shouldn't have done for a non-fair wage that has them in impoverished positions working poor. If you knew how many people are working and still homeless in the city of Detroit, you'd be surprised.
Absolutely, absolutely. You just touched on a whole lot right there, my brother. But it's all spot on, right? So that theory of, oh, people didn't want to work when they got the money. Well, they didn't want to break their back to make pennies when they finally were able to live. And like you said, what did we see? We saw a lot of joy, right? We saw a lot of joy. People were happy, and they were happy to spend that money locally. A lot of local businesses, restaurants, right? You can patronize in your community when you actually have that dollar. Um, so another thing that this Office of Violence Prevention can include are trainings and research. So I talked about that de-escalation training or the conflict resolution. Those are all great tools that every resident should be able to sign up for and get those resources and be able to be leaders in their community. We need research. We need research to prove, hey, these policing and surveillance and technology is not doing what it needs to do. It's not effective and we don't want it. We already know that, but you know how you got to play the game sometimes. Sometimes you got to show the city like we have this independent research that says what the people have been shouting from the rooftops all along. Now can you please listen to us, right? And so we don't want more policing. We don't want more surveillance. We want more funding of the people, of resources, of community centers for children, of after school programs, of job readiness programs, of again all these substance abuse treatments that's needed, and therapy, right? Even just basic health care. We need all these things. All these things prevent crime. They prevent violence. They prevent harm being done. And so what we're asking folks to do is come on down on Monday. All right? This is Monday is technically the last budget hearing day. That is when city council is going to vote on the budget. The mayor has veto power till the end of the week, but we don't want to take it there. We want to make our demands known on Monday, April 10th. Come on down at 2 o'clock. There's 3 ways that people can make public comment. You can either attend in person, so come on down. We'll be there at the Coleman Young building, 13th floor. Tell your personal story. If you've been affected by eviction, if you've been affected by violence, if you've been, harmed by the police, whatever the case, come down, have your voice heard, tell the city what you want, how you want this money to be spent. If you can't physically make it down, you can attend online via Zoom. We got the link there. You log on, you got to raise your virtual hand right away, so then your name will be added to the list. If you don't have Zoom capabilities, you can also call in on the phone. And we got the phone numbers there and the meeting ID that you got to punch in. So please, 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 people, come on down on Monday. Now, Tuesday, the following day, April 11th, is a general body city council meeting. Folks can still come on down at 10 a.m. and just reiterate how they want to see this money, where they want the city to actually invest. And so again, just to reiterate our demands, it was $27 million for fully funding the right to counsel, and we want a minimum of $50 million in the Office of Violence Prevention.
All right, with that, thank you so much. And I can't wait to get these victories, have you back on, and break more of this stuff down.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you again for having me. It's truly been my pleasure. I hope we've reached the people, the masses. Come on down and let's stay in constant conversation. This is not a one end, situation. It's not a one end street. These are back and forth conversation. We're consistently trying to be in community with people, and that means talking. And so I appreciate you for having this platform and having us on. So thank you so much, brother.
All right. Peace be.
Peace.